Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the C3EB Summit Day 2 afternoon sessions. Just like yesterday, the rest of today is packed with workshops and more keynotes for you. So I hope you enjoy the rest of today's jam-packed schedule. This is going to be amazing, but enough about the rest of the day. Let's focus on the now. Let's get present for this session because this is going to be an amazing session. Before I introduce our esteemed speaker and expert for today, a couple of housekeeping notes. Please make sure you go over to the YouTube channel, C3EB Summit, or our Facebook page at C3EB Summit to engage with us on the live stream. This way you can comment and we can respond to you. The YouTube comments are getting to us a little bit quicker than the Facebook comments, so that is something for you to keep in mind for a little bit more of real-time engagement. But that being said, there is a few second lag on both. At least that's what a few people have told me, so I'm just letting everybody know. And again, this summit and future programming would not be possible if not for our partners and sponsors walking this walk towards equity, belongingness, and intentional inclusion with us. So my deepest gratitude and thank you from the bottom of my heart to my partners and sponsors in this initiative: Essential IT, our web team, Defy the Status Quo Marketing, all of our content and social media marketing, including Sylvia Pinho, who is our social media manager, Zanzibar Enterprises, and of course the Nielsen Company. So with that being said, I am so excited and thrilled to present to you our next expert for this workshop presentation, Rachel Strivelli. Hi, Rachel.
Hello, how are you today?
Good, how are you?
Good.
So for people that may not know you, I just want to read your bio to our viewers who are coming in live or those who might be watching later. Rachel is a writer and garden and creativity coach, and also the founder and CEO of Soul Pioneer. Writer, garden and creativity coach, plant seeds and pull weeds to reach your goals and have something to harvest. That's both a fact and a metaphor too for her. Rachel has a master's in science in soil science. She's a former school teacher and an environmental educator. She wants you to have more self-acceptance, creativity, and connectedness in your life, which is why she's a perfect speaker for us today. She helps people to uncover the creativity and resources that will get you where you want to go by starting and taking consistent creative steps forward to reach your goals. She helps you to recognize the wisdom within you and the wisdom you can receive from the natural world around you through weekly emails, fun workbooks, online courses, and coaching. Go to her website to download the free video series, Stop Dooming and Glooming About Life in 2020. Get inspired and creative to drop the anxiety and overwhelm. Her website is soulpioneer.com. So with all of that, Rachel, again, welcome. And I'm going to hand off the stage to you so you can do your thing. And I'll be right here in the background.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. AJ. All right, so I'm going to start sharing some slides with you so you can walk along with what I am talking about. And thank you so much for that great introduction. It will take just a moment for me to get the screen going. So, okay. Current slide. And then, let's see here. I'm trying to set this up so you don't see all my excess notes and the future slides. View.
Do you see that slideshow option up top?
No.
It's two to the left of view where you are.
Yes, but when I do that, I don't see all of you. Is that what's going to
Yeah.
happen?
Yeah.
That doesn't matter? Okay, you can still see me even though I don't see you anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, good. That was my confusion. I apologize to everyone
No
for
problem.
my confusion here. Yes, I do see that part. I just didn't know that y'all could still see me. Okay, so I'm just going to go and let me know if you don't see me presenting and I'll change things. So today I am going to be talking with you about how we can look at our plates and our places to build a more equitable world. And there's my descriptor and website. So first, I want you to think about, this is my big question that I use to think about what I was going to be speaking with you today. And you can ask yourself this question as we go throughout this. Being an educator, even though I'm going to be presenting things and information and facts and ideas to you, I really strongly encourage you to also be making sure that your mind is open to different conclusions that I have drawn and to the possibilities that you see that I'm not aware of, because that's what I think good education does. So my question that I used when I was thinking about how could I talk about this with you was, what does caring about the environment, and more specifically through looking at gardens and farms, teach us about equity and inclusion and belonging? And I think there's some great connections that we're going to be hearing about. And the goal of my presentation was, I intend to offer you 1 to 2 new ways you can adopt and engage with practical, doable actions and habits to cultivate belonging, equity, and connection. I'm going to give you more than 2 ways. I'll give you a selection, but I'm hoping that 1 or 2 of those will really speak to you and be something easy that you can adopt. Because anyone who studies habit change and how we create things in our lives and in society knows that in order to have habits that we keep up with on a consistent basis, it needs to become part of our identity and part of our lifestyle. And so I don't just wake up thinking, what anti-racist or pro-equity actions can I do today? It's more, how can I make this a part of my lifestyle and my regular habits? So a little bit more about me. I love people. I love the planet. All my life, I've been focused on gardening, caring for the earth, caring for creatures, both human and non-human, and addressing injustice and degradation and inequity and those issues. As Dr. AJ said before, I'm a former school teacher, an organic gardener, and environmental educator. I got my master's in soil science because I wanted to dive deep into organic agriculture. The place where I studied also looked at our food systems. And so the first part of my presentation here, I'm really presenting to you how our food systems, as they are right now, how can we look at them and engage with them in a way that does promote more equity, belonging, and inclusion. And even though this is a complex issue, I am going to present a few kind of binary, polarized things for us to think about, an either or, like we could have this choice, but let's pick the other one. So we can look at dirt versus soil, deserts versus gardens, depletion versus regeneration. So I would love you to think about, where does your food come from? So maybe you had breakfast or lunch today, or if you're into intermittent fasting or you don't eat breakfast, think back to your dinner last night or the night before. That food got to you somehow. So what type of questioning or awareness do you have of who grew it, who harvested it, who transported it, who sold it, who cooked it? Any one of these, in some instances, it's the same person who does all of those. In some instances, it's a different person and we have no awareness of any of them. So there's a whole range here that we could be working with of who were the hands who touched this food as it got to us. I'm a mother, and this is one of the books that I read with my children. And even if you don't have children, it's an incredible book to get you to start thinking about some of the questions that I just asked you, so that you can cultivate an awareness of food and its origins. Because before you eat every day, somebody has to be doing something. Farmers have to be planting seeds. Those seeds have to be produced somewhere. Someone has to be transporting the food. Food packers, preparers, grocery store workers, bakers, beekeepers, and beer makers. And you know, one of the benefits of COVID, there are many downsides, of course, but one of the benefits to this pandemic is it has highlighted and brought more awareness to what are some of the inequities and weak points in society, in how we treat people and things like that. And I know first from when the grocery stores had empty shelves to then people hearing about what was going to happen with meat packing industries, and also people's awareness of the people transporting the food, you know, all of these elements that are involved in our food systems and food that's coming in from other countries to us. All of these elements that some people haven't really ever thought about before are becoming things that we are a little bit more aware of now. And it's an interesting way to start thinking about, well, what do we know about these people? So here are some stats and demographics for food producers and farmers in America. So the average farm size is actually quite large, 443 acres. And, you know, a generation ago, or rather 2 generations ago, they were much smaller. But over time, there's been this trend towards large farms, similar to how we have so many things that are industrialized in our world today. We have these massive farms. And while they do allow us to feed a lot of people, there are trade-offs that happen with that. And I'll address some of those. So 1% of the US population works on farms, so quite a small percentage. And even that, if it can open up your mind to thinking, wow, 1% of our population is doing something that is essential to all of our survival. Right there, that gives me chills thinking about, I want to be having gratitude for these people and honoring the efforts that they're making. If we go a little bit broader than just farms, 10% of our population is working in other food related jobs. So that could be working in restaurants, working in the kitchens, working in the food packing plants, transporting the trucks, working in grocery stores. So then a larger portion of people are getting the food to us. And this is where it goes beyond just looking at, agriculture and farms. It brings in other issues of wages and immigration and things like this. So 85% of farm workers are Latino origin, and yet only 1% of farms are owned by Latinos. So there we can see there's a discrepancy here of a lot of the people working there, but they're not owning them. 21% of the people working on the farms have green cards or permanent residency. 48% have no work authorization. And so currently I live in the southern US, but I used to live in the Pacific Northwest. And I've always been aware, because of my connection in agriculture in school and going to farmers markets and being involved with the local food systems, of being aware that when people talk about issues of immigration, if they are not acknowledging that we need people to be working the land to have the food, then they are ignoring a whole section of day-to-day existence. And I do believe that people who have an anti-immigration stance are ignoring that, because we're not going to be eating the same selection and the same degree of high quality food if there aren't people to work on the farms. Some other troubling numbers. So in 1910, 14% of farmers in America were Black farmers. And that's actually, I feel like a pretty good number. But then, you know, move forward 100 years, 2% of farmers are Black farmers. And unfortunately, similar to other things that have happened in our nation, there were injustices and inequities that caused that loss of wealth, that loss of land, sharecropping, Jim Crow laws, other inequities. There are organizations and people working to remedy some of this, and I will get to that later. But this is something for us to all be aware of. This is the climate in terms of what we're working with. But don't worry, I will present some solutions or ways that you can engage. So another area of our food system to look at is food access and food insecurity. And similarly, as some of the other stats that I've presented, this really does come across and highlights inequities that we see in other areas of life in our nation. So 21% of Black households experience food insecurity, 16% of Hispanic or Latino households experience it, but only 8% of white households experiencing it. And I'll get to this more in a moment, but food insecurity is tied to so many issues, some of which are obesity and other health issues. Well, food insecurity is partly a cause of food deserts. And this is not a geographical term, but rather a metaphor. And it is defined differently by different people, but essentially it's the lack of access to healthy, affordable food options. And the causes of it are, some of them have different contributing factors, but essentially redlining and local economies and inequities, and the consolidation of some of these smaller family farms over the last 100 years into these mega industrialized farms have contributed to fewer grocery stores or places to buy healthy food in Black and Latino neighborhoods. So when you live in a food desert, what are your choices? Well, unfortunately, these are your choices. And I was thinking, you know, whether or not you like burger and fries, it's not the most of us would agree, it's not the healthiest food. And if you're thinking about, you know, taking someone on a date or feeding your child or feeding your grandmother, like, let me give you a healthy meal to nourish you today. How many times are people like burger and fries, or let me just pop over to my local 7-Eleven and pick up some chips and Snickers bar? That's not what we would pick as our first choice for, let's go get food from these places. Let's go get fast food. Let's go get food from a convenience store. And yet, if you live in a food desert, which, as I've shared a moment ago, there's a large percentage of Black and Hispanic communities, people in those communities who do, these are your first and easiest options for food. And if you use public transit or you have some type of transportation or mobility issues, the food desert becomes even more difficult because you are going to have to travel farther to get this food. So some of the long-term effects of food desert are you're going to be more likely to eat unhealthy. You know, it's this idea of proximity. If two steps or 1 block from my house is a KFC and my family's hungry and I've got, you know, $20 to feed them, I might pop over to the KFC. If the closest grocery store is 3 miles away, but I can just pop over there, the tendency is to go for what's close, especially if you're going to have to do public transit and things like that. So you're going to be more likely to eat unhealthy and or travel farther to get healthy options. Other long-term effects are declining health, a weaker immune system, which in this day and age, we know we need stronger immune systems. Higher risk of diabetes, heart disease. So that's for, you know, general population. But then if we look at students and youth, it becomes even more of an issue. And I have worked with many programs working to do garden education and food education with youth. So if you don't have healthy food, or if you don't have any food at all, issues come up like attention span difficulties in school success difficulties, higher infant mortality rate. Also, what happens is the youth have no taste or no knowledge or limited of how to cook with fresh fruits and veggies. And so even if then you are, let's say you have access to go to a food bank or get some of those, if you don't know what to do with them, you're not likely to use them.
Hey, Rachel, I don't mean to interrupt you, but your slide is still on the first slide. You haven't moved them.
Oh, no.
So if you just want to continue from where you are, what we can do is after, we can share these slides with everybody.
I am so sorry. I don't know how it's not working.
You have to click over to the next slide.
So, but from here, it won't, like okay, so is everybody else going from screen to screen on your computer? Because it doesn't show me that I'm here with you. I'm on a whole nother slide.
Yeah.
Maybe I didn't understand. Okay, I can handle it now from current slide. Okay. I think, but now I have to go back to where you are. Maybe I just don't.
You can continue talking about long-term impacts of food deserts, since that's what
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. I actually know how to use technology and PowerPoint, but it seems like it's not letting me stay here with you.
So when you move to the slide, just, on here, you just move to the next slide.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let me, so one other factor I want to share, and so in some areas, well, actually maybe a lot of areas, this lack of food for students was addressed in late 60s and or early 70s. The Black Panther Party actually had been pinpointing like, oh, if our students aren't getting good food, then how are they going to do well in school? How are they going to grow and have healthy bodies and all that? And so they started doing programs to feed youth and provide breakfast. And then actually the USDA learned from that, and that's why now in schools across the country there's free breakfast for all students of any economic level, so that students are provided that. Okay, 2 ways that you can address food deserts are you can, and there are multiple ways, so I'm just going to share with you 2 today, are community gardens and mobile grocery stores. So, okay, let me go back. Sorry, I'm trying to make this so it's better for everyone. So I'm a huge proponent of community gardens. They have great health benefits because the produce that you are getting from the community garden is incredibly healthy. It's often you're eating it very soon after it's been harvested, so the nutritional value is high. There's also reduced crime in neighborhoods that have community gardens, and this goes along with what's called in criminology the broken window effect. The idea that when areas look neglected and uncared for, then subconsciously or unconsciously there's more behavior that doesn't care for that area and more neglect and more crime. In contrast, when areas are cared for, when gardens are cultivated and green spaces are cared for, it reduces crime. There's this subconscious and unconscious message, people care about this place, they're not neglecting it. It increases property value and it grows community. And for about the last 10 to 15 years, the number of community gardens across the nation have been growing because of these positive effects. Mobile grocery stores are another low-cost way to bring produce to communities, and it involves, similar to a food truck, it involves people to offer produce for the person running the mobile grocery store. It's a lower overhead and lower cost to entry, and it allows them to meet the needs of different neighborhoods. Okay, so trying to see how I can kind of keep the different slides going so that you have some level of being updated with what I'm doing. So as I was thinking about this presentation and sharing with you all, I really thought about, there was one idea that came to me that I thought was in some ways very simple, but one of the most important things. And that is when we share a meal with someone, especially if it's somebody who comes from a different background than us, or, and I know there's some people who say, who've been in this summit who talk about, let's move beyond the term race, but I'm going to use it today just because I don't know what other term to use yet. If we have a meal with somebody of a different race, if we start sharing food, we reach this place of understanding this person, sharing common ground. We express respect and dignity. And in Chef Eric Williams, he's the owner of Virtue Restaurant in Chicago. So when I found this quote from him, it hit me and felt like it summed up so much how something that seems so simple can really start to have massive impact, because at the end of the day, a lot of this building of equity and interconnectedness and inclusion, each of us can start one-to-one with the relationships in our lives, and that can inform us and expand our awareness and help us to choose different actions. So one way I like to think of it is, the power of potlucks. So when we break bread together, we build bonds. We start to see things differently. We share food knowledge, recipes, culture that we aren't sharing if we're not doing that together. And so I know that because of COVID, your ability to do a potluck is probably much reduced than what it could be in other time periods. But I still want to challenge or encourage you, find ways to connect with and gather with others to share food, share recipes, share seeds, share food knowledge, because this is part of adding a richness back into our lives and building these connections and relationships. And there is a history there that we can honor and acknowledge and make a part of our lives when we do that with others. So some of the actionable habits that I would like to share with you that you can choose to take, possibly one of these, possibly two. These are ways that you can start to incorporate habits into your life. So I encourage you to notice, honor, and support those who produce the food. Support and value local BIPOC farmers and growers. Support community gardens. Be aware of local food policies and politics. Find a way to gather with others virtually to share food and food knowledge. So that's kind of the landscape of the food systems. I'm going to briefly talk a little bit about soil and organic gardening, and then give you some action items, action habits for that. So poor soil quality is actually connected to colonialism, produces nutrient poor produce, and results over time in unhealthy and malnourished people. There are higher instances of erosion and land degradation, and irresponsible and poor stewardship of the land and its resources. So in Europe, with the era of colonialism, the soils there had been depleted and degraded for hundreds of years because of poor soil management. And a lot of what drove this outward exploration for new lands and new crops and all of this was the land wasn't able to sustain the current population in the state that it was in. Now, good soil quality has so many positive benefits. It is the foundation of good physical health. It colonizes our gut biome and makes a radical difference in our lives. The microbes in soil contribute to good moods. There's one type of microbe called actinomycetes, which they've been scientifically found to act as an antidepressant. The good soil quality produces healthy crops, healthy ecosystems, robust society, and more. It's also more resilient to climate change and degradation. There are many ways that you can contribute to and cultivate soil quality. Organic gardening is one of those, minimizing and eliminating the use of pesticides and chemicals. incorporating some more ancient or traditional gardening practices from indigenous communities and other places. So there are many ways, because healthy soil is not just dirt. Soil is made up of living and non-living elements, and it's got water in it, air, organisms, minerals. A handful of soil has more microorganisms than there are people on Earth, which still continues to blow my mind every time I think about that. And plant life, food production, and our societies depend on the soil. But here's the interesting thing also about this. These massive farms that I told you about, 400 plus acres, and some are more, that's just the average. And these industrialized farms, they often don't have the time or the resources when they're putting out food so quickly to work on caring for the soil and nurturing it and nourishing it. And so a bigger idea for us to think about, which is really a paradigm shift that we need to make over the next number of years, is, you know, some people feel that organic food or food prices are a hot button issue, or that it can become this thing of privilege. And I'm not saying that it isn't. To have more money to spend on your food is a form of a privilege. But the other issue is there's a cost for food production. One way or another, there's not a way, there's no cost. And sometimes we pay for it with our dollars, and sometimes it's paid for in other ways, either degradation of the land or lower wages for the farm workers and things like that. So now I want to share with you a few of my role models and heroes of this world, because they have done so much to contribute to the cause, and I believe that we can get some inspiration from them. So you've probably heard of Dr. George Washington Carver. He's famous for peanuts, but it does not end there. And peanuts is only, you know, it might be the placeholder you have in your brain for what he's famous for. But some people called him like the Da Vinci of his time, or the Da Vinci in terms of agriculture and working with the land. He was so incredibly inventive and resourceful and amazing and intelligent. So he taught at Tuskegee Institute. And one of the reasons he chose there to teach was he said he wanted to unlock the golden door of freedom to our people. Once he got there and started working with the people, he very immediately saw, wait a minute, growing cotton as a monoculture, which means fields of only cotton, one crop only, and that's it. It was depleting the land. So in nature, same as in human societies, if you do not have diversity, over time, there is a lower quality and things aren't as good, because we're not designed to, systems aren't designed to run like that. And I'm speaking of this from a natural point of view. So what he did was he knew that some of these farmers, they were working with limited resources and trying to accumulate some financial stability and work with their land to get ahead, or to have a more stable situation for their families. He came up with solutions that they could use that didn't involve them buying lots of expensive fertilizer. So the peanut is a nitrogen fixing plant, which means it takes nitrogen from the atmosphere, puts it into the soil, which means if you're using it and composting it, you don't need to bring in outside fertilizers and outside sources to nourish your soil. And the cool thing about the peanut then is it's nourishing your soil and you get food from it. He understood these connections and the mutual dependency of animal, vegetable, and mineral kingdoms. And he really worked hard to give as many resources to the people working the land as he could. And so he is just an inspiration. Someone from our modern time who inspires me in a radical and amazing and maybe even understated way, because I don't see that she like is out there screaming about how great she is, but Ira Wallace, who's with the Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. So that the Southern Exposure Seed Exchange is a cooperative that collects and sells Southern heirloom seeds. And one of the reasons that they do those seeds is because regional growing, you can have seeds that better suit where you are in terms of climate, and you need less management when you grow seeds that are suited for where you live. So there's a whole selection of traditional seeds, peas, naturally colored cotton, collards, turnip greens, etc. Seeds, she calls them family heirlooms, which I think is a beautiful way to think about it. Seeds are something we can pass down in our families, that we can share with our communities, and it's a way of wealth too. The Southern Exposure Seed Exchange takes a safe seed pledge, which I'll share with you in a minute. And if you want to follow Ira Wallace, she's a gardener, author, educator, and she's one of the worker owners at the cooperative. So the Safe Seed Pledge is says that agriculture and seeds provide the basis on which our lives depend, and we must protect this foundation, and it must be genetically stable source for future generations. And so those who take the Safe Seed Pledge say they will not knowingly buy or sell engineered seeds or plants. So the actionable habits that you can think about for farming and agriculture that I have just shared with you are: you can support and value local farmers and organic agriculture. You can only buy or grow seeds or organic seeds or seeds with a Safe Seed Pledge. And again, you can be aware of local food politics and policies. And my last section that I'm going to share with you, this is about ecological awareness and also connection to the land where you live. So there's a law of ecology that talks about there is no free lunch. And so a minute ago when I was talking about with food prices, there's always a cost for things that we choose. And in many things in life we can look at, there are opportunity costs. If you do X, then Y will result, and if you do this one thing, there's always this other thing that's a trade-off. Well, that happens with the land too. And this is one of the reasons why I think everyone should grow something that is edible. And if you live in an apartment, that could be herbs or microgreens. If you have a patio, you can grow things in pots. If you have a backyard or a front yard, you can start to grow. Maybe you start with herbs, or maybe you start with other small plants. One of the reasons is, as I shared before, about people tending the fields and working on the farms and all the food that comes to us. If you have never grown anything or worked on a farm, there is a massive lack of awareness of all that entails, the difficulty of it, the time it takes to cultivate good soil quality, and all of those other elements. And in some ways we take it for granted that we can just pop over to the grocery store and buy whatever vegetables we need. But as I said before, COVID has brought some of this into people's awareness of, oh wait, maybe some of the things that I assumed aren't always the way that things are. So how can we honor the land or have a connection to the land? I'm a very spiritual person, and so I think we can also honor the sacredness of the land. And that's why before, when I talked about potlucks, I think breaking bread with people is a sacred process. When you live close to the land, whether you are literally like looking at that land a lot, I want you to notice the value and the beauty of the nature around you and the life forms around you. And this is both a thing that makes you feel good, but it's also shown by studies that the more you are connected to the natural world, and if you spend time with that, you increase your creativity, you also increase your empathy and your emotional intelligence. And I'm not sure if another summit presenter addressed this, although probably in one way or another. If we're going to be cultivating equity, belonging, inclusion, and connectedness, which we need to be also cultivating, or coinciding with that, we're developing these skills of empathy and emotional intelligence. And so when we connect with the natural world, that starts evoking and building these connections in ourselves. So you can cultivate crops on your land, or you can just cultivate other flowers and things. It's also incredibly valuable and important to know who were the indigenous inhabitants of the land where you live. Some other ways you can cultivate a connection to your place on earth: you can play outside. You don't have to have children to play outside, although that can sometimes help. Know where the public outdoor spaces are. Know or work to value and protect public and natural spaces. And this doesn't hugely relate to some of the other things that I've shared about farming and agriculture, but it definitely does relate to equity and inclusion as well, because one of the most important things I believe is that we do have public outdoor natural spaces where anyone can go and feel safe. Anyone can go to enjoy nature, because I think nature is a right that we should all have access to. And it's important to then protect those natural spaces where we live so that everyone has access to them, not just the wealthiest or the majority, or the more privileged people. You can notice the nature where you live. And this time, more than ever, it's so important to ground in. And what I mean by that is having time to sit or stand or walk outside, where you just turn off the technology, turn off the podcast, turn off the outside world, and be present with the natural world, be present in your body. Everyone needs to be cultivating self-care in this time, because it's even though there are positive changes happening, it's also a very difficult and triggering time. And especially, I feel like if you are Black or person of color, then your self-care, I feel like I want to help you to do that. I want to encourage you as much as I can, that I see that is valuable, because this is, especially for your community, a really trying time to get through. And this work that's happening, even though it's inspiring, like, we need to be caring for our human bodies. And sometimes the easiest way to do that is to go be out in a space where no one's expecting us to be a mom or a boss or a coworker or a person on social media with an opinion, but you can just go and be a human being. So I encourage you to walk and sit and breathe in the air in natural spaces. My area where I live, because I'm aware of the original inhabitants of the land, is Cherokee land. And I often try to grow crops to keep the seeds alive and honor those who have lived here before me and who some still live near me. So Cherokee purple tomato, the Cherokee Trail of Tears beans. I also, whenever I use the Three Sisters gardening method, it's a traditional indigenous method of planting. I think about the ancestors who lived on this land, who came up with that method, and I express my gratitude. So it's really critical to be aware of and address the local history and impact of people. As I said before, I live in the South, and so I buy my seeds from Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, because they produce regional seeds. But wherever you live in the country, there is a seed company who produces seeds for your area. And this slide may be, for many of you, maybe the most valuable slide that I share. So you may want to go back and look at this. This is just a sampler of organizations who I have been inspired by, or who I contribute to, or who I've learned from, who are working with this connection of our land and our food and our people. And each one of them is working on creating equity and belonging and justice through the food systems, or through how we're working with the natural world. And so this is a selection. There are many other organizations. There are also many leaders who I didn't present in this presentation because it's only so long. A book, if you love reading, that would be a great one to get into is by Leah Penniman. So she's a leader in this movement as well, and she's one of the owners of Soul Fire Farm, which works on regenerative agriculture. So her book is Farming While Black, and they are all about, at Soul Fire Farm, agriculture education, land regeneration. Oh, I realize there's a typo there. Fair wages, healthy food, carbon sequestration, and more. And one of the first ways that I found them, and that I've shared about them before on social media, is they have a reparations map. I actually don't remember if they've produced it or if it's someone else, but it gets updated, and it is farms across the nation, farms and food systems who are seeking resources and help with reparations. All right, so your actionable habits for this section. So you can support reparations and decolonization of our land and our food systems. You can support equity in food and farming systems, cultivating a connection to your place on earth. Your place is unique. And I really strongly encourage you to grow something edible and notice what you become aware of because of that experience. It's one of the biggest, I believe, teaching or transformational experiences if we let ourselves participate in it and notice what's happening. So if you are inspired to grow something, but then you're like, I don't really know what I'm doing, feel free to reach out to me. I have a free group on Facebook where we share gardening tips and seeds and resources and that type of thing. So and I definitely welcome you to get in touch with me. If you hear of other resources, leaders in this movement, I am always looking to follow and support other folks who are engaged with this work. And I welcome you to connect with me. I'm on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. And so that is the sum of my presentation.
Thank you so much for that, Rachel. I know that, you know, you and I have spoken about this before, but this was so informative. And I love that you talked about connecting back with nature and really, like, you know, ever since you and I spoke, actually, I've been very intentional about walking a little bit barefoot where I can, where I know there's no, like, you know, twigs and bugs and all of that. And it is definitely very grounding and energizing. And so these are great practices that you've given. And we do, you know, we have had a few other people. We had one yesterday, and then we have one more tomorrow who are talking about these similar issues. And so I will definitely make it a point to connect all of you to, especially yesterday's speaker, Rose Verdonvois, who is American Heritage. So I think you guys will get along famously. So with that being said, you know, again, thank you so much for doing this, and for all of our listeners and viewers who are here live or who are joining in on this later. Thank you so much for joining us. If you like this content, please make sure that, you know, you subscribe to our YouTube channel and you go to our Facebook page and give us a rating. You know, between all of this content that you're getting, your feedback is absolutely critical for us to continue our programming and to keep improving what we are able to deliver to you. And I know all of our speakers would also appreciate that feedback so that they can tailor their future programming towards your particular needs as well. So your feedback always helps us who are content creators in creating better content for you. So please make sure you do that. And as a closing note, again, thank you to all of our viewers. Thank you to our sponsors and partners, without whom the summit, you know, would not be possible for this summit and for all future programming as well. So thank you to Essential IT, our web team, Defy the Status Quo Marketing, Zanzibar Enterprises, and of course the Nielsen Company. And last but certainly not least, again, Rachel, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for providing your expertise and experience on this topic in this space so that we can all learn and grow together.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. And maybe next time I'll know how to do the slide thing right, or get my tech worked out, but at least y'all have the slideshow.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, we will see you in the next session. Our next keynote, which starts at 1 in just about 8 minutes. So we will see you there. All right. Bye.
Bye.